Finland topped the world in education, built a phone giant that owned the planet, and looked untouchable. Then in 2008, the music stopped, and it has barely grown since. Here is how a perfect country quietly started slipping. For years, Finland was shown as the country that just got it right. World-class schools, a standard of living the rest of Europe openly envied, but that picture is now cracking fast. Since the 2008 financial crisis, the Finnish economy has basically stood still. The government keeps cutting social spending and hunting for savings. The big question is simple: can Finland ever get its shine back? To understand how big the problem is, rewind to a time when this place looked like one of Europe's greatest success stories. Around 2007 and 2008, Finland could honestly call itself the star pupil of its region. Here is the wild part. Finland had just 5.3 million people, and yet this tiny nation built an economy playing in Europe's top league. In 2007, Finnish GDP was around 180 billion euros. The economy was growing fast for such a rich country, and living standards sat clearly above the EU average. Look at GDP per person, and it gets impressive. Finland was running at roughly 122% of the EU average. They were not just ahead, they were beating most of the continent. So what powered all of this? Finland stood on a few strong pillars, and the first one became famous in every pocket on Earth. Pillar 1 was technology, and its giant symbol was Nokia. For a while, this one company basically was the future. We will come back to just how massive it got, because the number is shocking. Pillar 2 was old school industry: wood, paper, machinery, electronics. These traditional sectors had carried Finland for generations. Pillar 3 was human capital, and this is where the legend really begins, because around this time Finnish schools were shown to the entire world as the model to copy. In the 2006 PISA study, Finnish students were at the absolute top, first place in science, top in math among OECD countries, and among the best on the planet in reading. Put it all together and Finland looked unstoppable. A small, smart, modern country beating the giants. But from today's view, you can see the cracks that nobody wanted to notice. The Finnish model was strong, that is undeniable, but it was far less resistant to change than it looked. And when the world shifted, Finland's biggest strengths quietly turned into its biggest weaknesses. The first great test was the 2008 global financial crisis. It hit everyone, of course, but for Finland, something strange happened. Most countries clawed their way back to growth after a few years. Finland never truly returned to its old pace. The data on GDP per person tells the whole painful story. In 2008, Finland sat at about 122% of the EU average, well ahead of the pack. Then came the long, slow slide. By 2024, Finnish GDP per person had fallen to roughly 102% of the EU average. A country once far ahead was now barely above the middle. And this was not one bad year or a quick wobble. After 2008, Finland entered an era where it just kept getting harder to recover, raise productivity, and stay ahead of the rest of Europe. Let us be honest though, the crisis alone does not explain this. If it were only 2008 and 2009, Finland should have bounced back. It did not. So what really broke? Finland started losing two pillars that once gave it power. The first was Nokia and its whole telecom world. And remember that shocking number I promised? At its peak in 2007, Nokia controlled around 40% of the entire global mobile phone market. Some sources put it as high as 51%. One company, one small country. For a nation of barely 5 million people, that scale was almost unimaginable. In the early 2000s, Nokia employed over 20,000 people inside Finland alone. Thousands more worked indirectly for its suppliers and partners. Around Nokia grew a whole ecosystem of engineers, universities, and smaller firms. It was the beating heart of the economy. In its best years, Nokia accounted for several percent of Finnish GDP and a huge chunk of national research spending. But a giant like that has a dangerous flip side. When a company that big starts to stumble, it can drag the entire country down with it. And that is exactly what happened when the smartphone revolution arrived. The iPhone, Android, touchscreens, apps, a totally new way to use a phone. Nokia had ruled the classic mobile, but it could not adapt fast enough to this new world. As Nokia weakened, Finland lost the company that had pulled along its innovation, its exports, and its belief that a small northern nation could be a tech capital of the world. But here is where it gets worse. Nokia was not the only engine dying. At almost the same time, a second, much older pillar started to fail too. Forests, timber, and paper. For decades, Finland was a powerhouse in wood and paper, built on its geography and endless forests. In the mid-2000s, the forest sector employed nearly 90,000 people. That was about 4% of everyone working. Before the crisis, the forest industry made up over 5% of the value added in the whole economy. Then technology turned on it too. Digitalization. Newspapers moved online, offices used less paper, documents went digital. Global demand for paper simply stopped looking the way it used to. This was a brutal blow. A country that once rode both modern Nokia and traditional paper suddenly watched both worlds turn against it at once. Think about it. When a small country loses part of its future and part of its industrial past at the same time, getting back on the growth path becomes incredibly hard. And here is the core problem. Finland did not collapse with Nokia. It stayed rich, stable, with great institutions. Still one of the best organized states in Europe. But after losing its old engines, one question hung in the air. What is supposed to push this economy forward now? For years, Finland never found a good enough answer. Once the answer was easy, Nokia, exports, paper, high productivity, brilliant workers, a model that let a small state compete with the biggest. After 2008, that formula stopped working. Finland still had skilled people and a high quality of life, but it was missing something bigger. It was missing a new success story to replace the old one. This hit productivity hard. Real growth in a rich country does not come from people working more hours. It comes from creating more value in every single hour. That value comes from technology, better organization, investment, innovation, and new industries. Before the crisis, Finnish productivity grew fast. After 2008, that growth clearly faded. A rich country cannot grow with simple methods. It has to keep inventing new sources of advantage. Increasingly, Finland looked like a nation still living off success built in a previous era. And just when it needed a break, another blow landed. Russia. Finland was never communist, never part of the Eastern Bloc. It was Western, democratic, capitalist, but geography never asks for permission. Finland shares over 1,300 kilometers of border with a giant neighbor. For decades, it had to play a very careful game with Moscow, Western at heart, but unable to ignore the bear next door. Economically, those ties mattered. Finland traded with Russia. Finnish firms operated there. Russian tourists filled Finnish cities. In 2021, Finland exported around 3.7 billion euros of goods to Russia. That was over 5% of all Finnish goods exports. Imports mattered even more. Finland brought in about 8.6 billion euros from Russia, nearly 12% of all imported goods. Mostly raw materials, energy, fuel, timber, metals, and chemicals. Then the 2022 invasion of Ukraine blew the whole arrangement apart. By late 2023, exports to Russia fell below 1% of all goods exports. Imports dropped under 2%. A relationship built over decades was almost completely cut in a matter of months. Finland quickly joined NATO, poured even more money into defense, and accepted that for years it will be a key state on the alliance's eastern flank. Smart for security, another heavy weight on the economy. But here is the strangest part of all. Even after all of this, Finland could still rebuild through its greatest symbol of all, education. Except that pillar is cracking too. For years, the Finnish school was the global model. Proof you could get amazing results without crushing pressure, without test obsession, without a rat race. Just trust in teachers and high-quality teaching. And for a long time, it truly worked. In the first decade of the century, Finland had one of the best education systems on Earth. But after 2009, its students' international scores began to fall. Finland still has good schools, but it is no longer the education phenomenon it once was. And here is why that is so dangerous. Education breaks an economy slowly. A housing bubble bursts and you see it fast. Rates rise and borrowers feel it instantly. But weaker schools today mean weaker workers in 10 or 15 years and a harder fight in the global economy. And Finland cannot compete on cheap labor. No giant home market, no scale like Germany, France, or the United States. It must win on quality, knowledge, technology, and human capital. So weak schools strike the foundation itself. A country once the symbol of success now shows that even a rich, well-run state can lose its momentum. And Finland is not alone. Even oil-rich Norway is starting to feel the strain. But that is a story for another video. Thanks for watching.